Good morning and good morning, everyone. My name is Kantai. I'm a research associate from the Center for Educational Research and Innovation of CDRI. And it's my great pleasure to be the moderator of today's researcher conversation series. And welcome everyone to our research conversation series. And just a quick introduce of our conversation series. This conversation series aim to encourage informal and free discussion among researchers in various topics in relation to research as well as professional development. And this is the fourth of the research conversation series, and I hope you learn from it. Not only related to the how we publish research article, but maybe other topic as so. Yeah. Um, Today's topic is about publishing in a leading development journal. And me today, I think we not only have the editor, but we also have the authors from the local, our Cambodian authors and editor, and we also have the from the abroad, like Professor Hyun that with us. So just a quick introduce of our speakers. Today we have three eminent speakers. First, we like with me, next to me, we have a Professor Hyun Shin. Professor Hyun Shin is a professor of Geography and Urban Studies, and he is also the director of the Swee Hock Southeast Asia Centers at the London School of Economics and Political Science. On top of his two roles, he is also an editor of the International Journal of Urban and Regional Research. Currently, Professor sits on international advisory boards of a journal of Antipode and editorial board of local and international journals such as Urban Geography, Cultural and Society, Space and Environment, and China City Planning Review. This is quite a lot. And for his academic background, Professor Hyun holds his PhD in social policy from the London School of Economics and Political Science from the UK. Next to Professor Hyun, we have Dr. Heng Kim Kong. Dr. Heng Kim Kong currently joined the Department of Scientific Research of the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports as a National Technical Advisor. I think Dr. Kim Kong is one of the Cambodian scholars that actively engage in research and publication. He is a co-founder and chief editor of the Cambodian Journal of Educational Research, like one of the local journals in Cambodia. And lately, he becomes a co-editor-in-chief of the Cambodian Journal of STEM and Education Research, which is operated by the Department of Scientific Research that promote the publication in Khmer language. On top of the about two positions, Dr. Kim Kong is also a PhD fellow based at the Center for Educational Research and Innovation of CDRI, as well as a visiting research fellow at the Cambodian Development Center. For our last but not least speaker, we have Dr. Sok Sampho. She is a postdoctoral research fellow based on the Center for Khmer Study in Cambodia, and she just I think for her educational background is a PhD in political science from University of Hawaii at Manoa. So thank you so much all of our three speakers that are joining us today. So as you may know, today's topic is about publishing in leading development journals. I think it is very important topic not only for researchers or the graduate students, but it also important for the professor or lecturer at the academic institutes, because those kind of publication work helps not only to generate new knowledge, but it also help to accelerate their professional recognitions as well as the progressions. And sometimes, as I know, it is one of the requirement in the in their workplace, because like what I usually heard, like if you don't publish, you will be punished, which means that um, it's if you don't publish the research, that might make you lag behind your peer. So in today's discussions, we gonna unfold two interconnected things. First, from author perspective, we gonna learn how to prepare the manuscript and submit for the publication. And second, from the editorial perspective, we gonna learn how they operate their journal and how they evaluate on the manuscript so that those manuscripts are meet their like quality standard. So yeah, this is like the introduce of our fourth research conversation series, and I like to get started with Professor Hyun. I think most of us like maybe the students, and we might need to know like the very basic thing about what actually is the academic journal, and what is it for, and yeah, please have a quick introduce about that kind of thing a little bit.
Sure. Well, first of all, can you hear me? This is what. Uh, yeah, it is working, right? Well, first of all, thanks so much for this invitation and opportunity to share my thoughts and to be able to meet all of you here in person and also on Zoom. A great pleasure to be here in Cambodia and in CDRI. Academic journals, and what are those? I guess it'll be useful to start by thinking about where you publish your findings and what sort of outlets you may have as researchers in order for you to share your research outcomes. So you may have books, monographs, or you may have research reports that you may share with the government or with the well, whoever has been commissioning you to produce these reports. Sometimes you may have these days blogs, which are also very useful increasingly because of the way in which they can reach out to general audience. You may have newspaper editorial columns, which also will be a useful way of reaching out to general audience and communicate your research findings. Those are very useful tools, and I would suggest you don't consider those actively as a way of sharing your research outcomes. Having said that, research journals, especially academic journals like the one I'm editing with my colleagues, International Journal of Urban and Regional Research, are targeting international academic audience. Right? So in a sense, you are looking at basically the outlets which are very specialized in disciplinary understandings, and there are so many of these, by the way, which would allow you to share your research outputs in a certain way that can be communicated to the international research community or scholarly community based on your own disciplinary background. There are interdisciplinary journals like the one I'm editing, but there are also more specialized journals in certain areas. And I suppose depending on where you are working on, you will be able to choose the one that you will meet your expectation and need. Having said that, it will also be useful just to think about a few questions when it comes to think about academic journals. And I guess those are something we'll come back and I probably stop here and consider the next question you may have.
Yeah, thank you, Professor, for highlighting different type of journals and the type of audience that is target. Just a quick follow-up question. Maybe like how can we know or distinguish between the academic journal and non-academic journal? How can we quickly distinguish that?
Academic journals and non-academic journals. Well, I mean, these academic journals are largely journals which are peer-reviewed by researchers. Non-academic journals are largely those which do not involve peer reviewing process. I mean, academic journals are going to be quite a challenge to publish in, largely because of the way they have a system of rigorous reviewing procedure and involving editors initially in the initial screening process, and also peer reviewers who are experts in the research areas that you're working on, to be basically conducting anonymous peer reviews. So sometimes the number of reviews can be 2, it can be 3, 4, sometimes 5, depending on which journals you're looking at. And these are all anonymously conducted in order for them to provide qualitative evaluation of the quality of your papers that you submit. And then after they come back, basically you're in need of addressing those comments before they eventually get accepted by the editors and get published. So in a sense, it's a process that does involve a high level of scrutiny by experts in the field, whereas non-academic journals are the ones which probably wouldn't involve that level of scrutiny, and therefore, I guess sometimes the quality might be subject to some questions. But these non-academic journals have their own use. I mean, very much depending on what you are aiming at and what the purpose of your writings are going to be about.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Now it's clearer to me that the academic journals has to gone through some peer review process to meet that kind of standard, so that they can be like distinguished from the non-academic journal. Yep. Thank you so much. And Bong Sampo, you are the author and also have gone through publishing quite a lot of research work. Could you please explain us how why do we need to publish academic journal, and for what purpose?
Hello, everyone. Also, thank you, Kantai, for the question, and also just wanted to quickly say it's a pleasure to be on the same panel with two very accomplished scholar, Professor Hyun and Dr. Hay. So I'm just gonna speak about respond to your questions from my experience and perspective as myself also early career scholar, and also new to publishing as well. But research publication is, and I'm talking also from academic perspective, is a way to, like Professor Hyun mentioned earlier, that is a way to communicate your research and also make your research visible to people in your field, but also to practitioners, and also publication is also a way to validate your research, because as Professor Hyun mentioned, it's going any publication has to go through a very rigorous anonymous peer review process, and also and yeah, it's also depend on journal, very highly scrutiny, and it also gives the researcher the confidence that their work is important and contributing to topic that they're working on. And also publication have to improve your research and writing skills, depending on the journal you publish to, or even working paper. when you submit your draft, it's going through anonymous peer review, and reviewers give you they tend to give you very honest feedback, and also and such feedbacks help you improve your writing skills through the revisions process. And lastly, publication in journal publications are the assets for people in academia, especially if you're an early career person or you are in a tenure track assistant professor. It's an asset to get you promoted or to get you higher into an academic position. So those are the key highlights that I find that I think are the reason to publish in the journal. Thank you.
Thank you, Bong Asampor, for your insights in general to what are the importance of publication. So yeah, like our speakers has mentioned, like we at least learn from the basic of what academic journal is and how is it important and what is gonna help you to your career. And now let's move on to the aspects of the how to like the journal, like the editor of the journal works in relation to the research and the publication. So Bong Kim Kong, as I know you are operating like leading like Cambodian journal related to educational research. Would you mind sharing us a little bit about your journal?
Okay. Thank you. So first of all, I'd like to thank CDRI for inviting me to participate in this conversation series, and thanks everyone for joining here and also on Zoom. Okay, so I currently edit one journal called Cambodian Journal of Educational Research, and I co-founded that journal in 2021, and so far we published 3 issues, and we are preparing for the 4th issue around this month or in January. So that journal, I create that journal because I want to create a platform for researchers in Cambodia to publish their research. Because as a researcher myself, I find it's very hard to publish my research finding in Cambodia. So we have a lot of journal in the world. We have international journal, for example, but what if you are a new researcher who just learned to publish? You can't publish internationally, you know, first time. So you need to learn to build your research and publication skill inside your country first, in local journal first. So that is the reason behind the establishment of that journal. Because I am involved in education, so the journal is about education. And we publish 2 times a year. One is in around July in the middle of the year, and one is in December at the end of the year. So every year we try to get the journal ready for publication in July or around July or August, and in December. So currently we have published 3 issues, and I try to still, you know, keep the journal, continue to sustain the journal, because it's easy to establish a journal. Actually, establish it's easy for issue, but you need to make sure that you have enough article to publish every 6 months for the journal. So we try to call for paper and try to ask. I keep asking all my friends that I know to, you know, write something or collaborate with me to publish, and mostly it's their first article that had never published before. For me, I try to also publish in that journal to promote like a research culture, encourage other researchers to publish as well. But I also publish internationally, so both. So like I have two roles now, helping others to publish and also publish it myself. And the journal that we are doing here is we accept three types of article. We accept short article around 3,500 words, and also long article around 7,000 words. So we do this because I feel that sometimes some young researcher or new researcher, they find it hard to write like a long research article, 7 or 8,000 words. So if they can summarize their thesis or their research project that they have done, summarize it into around 3,000 to 4,000 words, we can still accept that kind of article, and we call it like medium length article. So we publish short or medium length article around 3,000 to 4,000 words, and long article around 7,000 words. And also we accept book review. But so far we have not received any book review yet because I think a lot of people, a lot of Cambodian researcher or students that don't know how to book review. So because it's hard, you need to read the whole book and to summarize it. So, but we open that platform for anyone who would like to read a book, reviews it and publish it. So we have short article, long article, and book review. And we focus mainly on Cambodian because we call it Cambodian journal or educational research. However, we have received some paper from outside, from Nigeria, from other country, a few of them as well. And I have reviewed it, and somehow I find it not of good quality, so I just reject that. So I want to spend more time helping Cambodian researcher. So far we have not rejected any paper from Cambodian researcher yet, because when they submit to me, we send to review 1 or 2 times, and then come back to me. I review it again and again, like 4 or 5 times, and then we try to have edit and review until it's ready for publication. And one paper, it somehow it go around 10 times, 10 round of review. It unlike in international journal, mostly around 2 or 3 review only. But for here, for what I'm doing is just like helping my Cambodian researcher just to publish. Yeah.
Very interesting point. You would like to promote research culture in Cambodia, and that one of the reason you started the journal that you are operating right now. And the editor role, like you're not only the reviewer but also the editor, helping the manuscript improve and get published in your journals. That's very impressive. Professor Hyun, you also like sits in many like international journals. So would you like to share us a little bit about how the international journal is operating?
Sure. So I guess it'd be useful just to talk a little bit more about the journal I'm editing, and also maybe report to other journals at the same time. The journal that I'm editing is called International Journal of Urban and Regional Research. This was established in, the first issue came out in 1977, so it's been around for about 46 years now. We get about 650 submissions each year, and the submissions may include, the submission number doesn't refer to number of papers, but number of submissions. So some papers might be submitted a few more times, largely because they go through revision process. So each revision submission will be counted as one submission. In total, about 650 submissions a year, and we publish 6 times a year, every other month. And November was the most recent issue we published, and each issue will have about, let's say, about 10 papers on average. So you can kind of see how many papers we have a chance to get into the journal space. Our acceptance rate based on submission numbers will be about 5% each year recently. But the rejection rate is much lower. So acceptance rate is number of submissions that get accepted eventually to find their way into journal space, whereas the rejection basically refers to the number of submissions that get rejected and not being sent to peer reviews. The rejection rate last year was about 87%. So about 87% of the submissions were rejected, or not being rejected. Yes. But this year we are sending more papers out for review. So this year it's been about 67% so far, meaning that about 33% of the submissions get sent out for peer review process, and trying to work with more authors. Most international journals which are enjoying a high reputation will probably have similar degree of acceptance or rejection rate, especially if they are top tier journals. Now, what is probably important is, and it's really nice to hear about the Cambodian journals in the establishment as well, is, and this is one thing also a thought that is being shared by among our colleagues at the journal that I'm editing as well, is the importance of thinking about a more healthy relationship between local and international journals. So as researchers, you may consider a few questions when it comes to publishing. One is, should I publish in a very reputable journal in international domain, or should I go for a journal that is operating in my country? So like the journal which we are hearing about just now. It's also important to think about whether I should publish in English, or I should consider publishing in local language. And at the same time, what is the purpose of publishing my research findings, and how quickly they need to be published? How quickly it becomes quite an issue, because international journals like the one I'm editing has relatively long, it takes a long time to get the papers out. Sometimes on average, it takes about 1 year in iJournal that I'm editing, from the time of submission to the acceptance. So, and then it will take a little more for that to appear in journals. And many international journals with high reputation will take a long time for your paper to get accepted after going through a peer review process and to appear before they reach audience. Whereas other journals, which are, there are other journals which take much shorter time. And here, let me just give a brief warning that there are journals which can be seen as, which are known as predatory journals. And I think you need to really avoid them. Yeah, predatory journals are basically journals which are largely these days. And also accepting whichever papers get submitted to them, and without really scrutinizing them. So you probably need to avoid these journals largely because they will damage your reputation as researchers. Now, publishing in local language will be very important. And also in terms of sharing your research outcomes with your local population, because you have a duty to your population, your audience in your own country, in terms of sharing your research outcomes. But at the same time, it will also be important to consider sharing your outcomes with international community, largely because the understanding of your own country basically depend on the papers that get published on that country as well. So if you want the situation in Cambodia to be known to not only your own domestic population audience, but also to be known by the international audience, you really need to get those out in the international domain. And this is where international journals become quite important. And this is also the reason for you to consider which journals should I be targeting, the local one or the international one? And also, in what language I need to write, in local language or in international language, because of the way in which you need to make decision on who you are reaching out and how quickly you want to reach out to them. So the journals like iJournal, Urban Studies, Urban Geography, all these are really looking at international audience, and therefore there's an important, the role for these journals to play is basically shaping the knowledge at the global level because of the way they are targeting the audience. And this is where you as researchers from Cambodia may have a say, because you want the knowledge about Cambodia to be known to the international audience. But also, you probably want the knowledge on Cambodia to be shaped not only by international researchers, but by yourselves as well. And I think that's very important. And IJER, as an editor of IJER, it'd be really wonderful to have the submissions which are reporting on research projects carried out in Cambodia, for example, to be written by Cambodian researchers and not just by international researchers, right? Who may come in and work with you, but that's fine. But it'll be really important, and I think this is really important in terms of decentering knowledge production and also decolonizing the knowledge production as well, by means of incorporating and involving the researchers and the work of researchers from countries like Cambodia to be actively involved in the production of knowledge, which get disseminated at the global level. And I think this is where, I guess I just finished by saying, yes, it's really important to have submissions from you to both domains, local and global.
Professor, thank you so much for your insights. You have mentioned the like the key criteria to consider when the authors want to publish, and one of the thing I also interested is like the rejection rate of the international journal is very high comparing to the local journal. Bang Kim Kong, is there anything you would like to add about like the difference between the journal and the local journal?
Yeah, sure. So we talk about rejection rate. I think I can mention that as one criteria that we can differentiate between local and international journal. So we all know that international journal have high rejection rate or low acceptance rate. For example, like Professor had mentioned, acceptance rate is only around 10% or somehow less. So some journal they have acceptance rate around 10% or 5%, meaning that they receive 100 article, they accept only 5 or 10 articles. So if their acceptance rate is 10%, if they receive 100 articles, they publish only 10. 90, they reject. So those 90 articles need to be sent to other journal. So in my case, my own journal that I manage, that I edit, so far I reject only 3 articles. Okay, we published 3 issues already, so we tend to accept everything. But before we publish, we need to ask the author So, okay, again, so we receive, let's say we receive 10 articles. We all send those 10 articles to reviewer. We send to 2 reviewers. So reviewer return comment, we ask author to revise, and then come back again. We review again, ask author to revise again, review again, revise again, until we feel that, until I feel that, okay, now it's good enough for publication in this journal. So we don't reject. So far, we don't reject. But this year, I'm really busy. I'm so busy, and I find it very hard to continue to help them. So I reject a few so far. So far, like we reject only a few articles. So we can say that the rejection rate is like, what is it? Acceptance rate is 97%. So all of them need, so basically we all the articles that's been submitted to this journal, if we look at the quality like internationally, like operate like international journal, will be all rejected. because the quality is very low and most of the authors are first-time researcher, first-timer who write the article. So the article that they send to us, when we look at the quality is very low. So we try to have them more kind of provide mentoring support. Some also I reach out to them through Telegram, not just through email. And we send voice to me and I help them where to revise and come back again. So, so it's more like create a community for researcher, for young researcher. So I'm the one who tries to support them in terms of writing, editing, and everything. So the first one is rejection rate. Acceptance rate is different. And secondly is about quality. So we know that international journal, they have higher quality and local journal tend to have lower quality. The reason is about peer review and editing. So when you send your article to international journal, they are mostly sent to expert in the field. So the expert in the field that would, give good comment, find out where you can improve your article. And the author who submit to international journal tend to be the one who know about research and help publish. They have experience in publishing, so they know that their article might be accepted by international journal. So the author are good, the reviewer are good, and the editor also, kind of oversee the journal. They accept only the best article. But for local journal, we tend to accept everything, because if you don't accept any journal, you don't have issue to publish. Every time we publish, we need to have around 4 or 5 articles, for example, at least 3 or 4. So if you reject everything, so what do you have any article to publish every 6 months? No, but like the journal that Professor Hyun edited, he published 6 times per year because he received like 500 articles per year. Okay, so in my case, I receive 15 articles per year, for example, 15. So enough for 2 issues. One issue, six article, another issue, 6 article. But if I reject those articles, what can we publish? So that is, so the quality would be lower because we tend to accept everything. And another criteria is about language of publication. Mostly local journal that tend to publish in local language. For example, in Cambodia, we publish in Khmer. But international journal, the language would be mostly in English. However, we also have a journal that publish in English in locally. So it's just that some researcher, when they write in Khmer, they publish in Cambodia, for example. And if they write in English, they publish internationally. So in my case, I'm writing both now. I never written in Khmer before, but now I'm working for the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport, and we establish a new journal that will be published in Khmer. So I try to write in Khmer as well. So when I write in Khmer, I publish in local journal now, and write in English, send out to international journal. And the last criteria that I can talk about is editorial board. For international journal, most of the editorial board are international researchers from around the world. So the journal that I'm editing at the moment, most of the editorial board are Khmer researchers, all my friends and those that I know, that try to invite them to join the team, create a list of reviewer, a list of editor, and we help each other actually to build our own capacity and also helping other researcher promoting research in Cambodia. And I have invited a few international researchers as well to join our editorial board, but mostly like 96% are all Cambodian researchers. Actually, they're not really researchers. Some of them have never published any article, but they are interested in research. So we try to, build a community of researchers learning to publish and also helping other to publish. Yeah.
Can I just add a few points? I realized the acceptance rate and the rejection rate that I was referring to might have scared some of you. But let me just clarify what that actually means in reality, because it'll be important to share the fact that a lot of the papers that get submitted to, well, not only to journal I'm editing, but also many other journals, they get not, they don't get in a sense to peer review process largely because they don't meet the expectation of the journals. And the expectation, not meeting the expectation of journals occurs in two different ways. One is basically these papers haven't studied what the journal was trying to achieve, and therefore they are basically in the wrong category. Many papers do get submitted, even though they don't really, they're not the kind of papers the journal will be publishing, either because topical issues or the way they are looking at. So they are better off by being published in other journals. So there are many papers which actually do not fall into the scope of the journal, but they get still sent to us, and therefore they don't get sent to our peer reviewers. So there are many papers which are actually in that category, and therefore there's no point of sending them to peer reviewers for reviewers and for peer review process. So basically, it'll be important for you to study the journal and what the journal is trying to publish by looking at the papers that they are publishing and what kind of papers they are more likely to get accepted, and therefore your paper is written in such a way that is more likely to be considered by the journal that you are submitting to. So let me just say again, many of the papers that get rejected, they get rejected because they don't fall into the scope of the journal. They haven't studied the journal good enough, and therefore should have been sent to other journals in the first place. Other journal and which also means as long as the papers which are submitted, as long as they are having some potential, promising, and they follow the recommended in the structure of the journal, I would say most of these papers will be sent out to peer review process. And this is why I say the rejection rate this year was about 67%, meaning 33% of the submissions was sent out to peer review. So that means that's relatively high, I would say. So it'll be important to study the journal. One other thing I want to just also highlight after listening to previous comment is the fact that it'll be important to have really this joint effort to build the ecosystem of scholarly communities. So suppose that a paper on Cambodia comes to a journal like IJER, which I'm editing. Then what happens in the peer review process is when I, as an editor, select peer reviewers for them to review this paper on Cambodia, what I would usually try to ensure is there's an expert, a reviewer who has an understanding of who has a disciplinary understanding. So say, for example, if it's about urban redevelopment in Cambodian city of Phnom Penh, then I would want to have someone who has a good understanding of urban redevelopment in general. Also, I would want to have someone who has some experience of doing research in Cambodia as well, so that who understands the local context. I would also want to have someone from Cambodia who can comment on these, so that what the researchers are trying to say in the paper do some make sense. And so we wouldn't want the paper to be reviewed by experts who have no understanding of local context. So here's a question. How do you find the researchers who work on Cambodia, right? So there are many places across the world where they don't have many experts and working on those places. And this is where problems emerge. However hard I try, there are very limited number of researchers who work on certain regions, and these people are very on very high demand. We don't want to keep sending papers to the same person, and peer reviewing is a very a laborious process, and we can't send the same person whenever there's a paper on that particular place. So we want to diversify so that we don't exploit the peer reviewers who provide their labor. But there's a limitation in terms of finding and locating such people. This happens for many regions actually and countries across the world, and therefore it will be very important for local scholarship to actually develop so that experts who work on Cambodia do have their existence and their names are known to the international world, so that people like me will be able to come across with such researchers who work on those on Cambodia. And how do I come across with such researchers? Basically, that can happen by looking at the authors who have already published in journal like IJA, or by looking at other journals and whether there are authors who have written about Cambodia, and looking at the work that they do, so that when their areas of research fall into the area that I'm looking at and looking for, then they are basically potential peer reviewers. So it'll be really important in that regard also for you to also publish in international journals, so that you can be located and identified by someone like me or others who are looking for basically reviewers like you. And that also will be very important consideration when it comes to building local scholarship, like the Cambodia-based research journal. It's on education that you're hearing about, and this is another thing. Some regions and some countries have much. There are more to develop in certain disciplinary areas. So, for example, geography or human geography is not something that you see every country having very strong capacity, and therefore some disciplinary backgrounds will have much lower presence, and therefore in need of more development. And some other disciplinary backgrounds will have greater presence and interest. So there's an imbalance in that regard as well. So the capacity building will have to happen in multiple ways. One, local community to be strengthened, so that you have a large pool of researchers who have the capacity to publish in both local language and also in international languages. Also, who are capacity building across disciplines as well, and not just in one, so that you have a presence in multiple disciplinary areas.
Can I add a little? Okay, just add a bit about how, like what Professor has mentioned about selecting reviewer. So for my journal, local journal, but we operate like the same procedure as international journal. So when the author submit the article, we editor like myself, I will have a look first, whether it's meet the guideline or not. So when it meet the guideline, we send to reviewer. And how we select reviewer? Actually, we have a list of reviewer, and they are kind of expertise. So, but what we do is not really send to those who have that expertise, but for example, we send one paper to this guy, number one. The next one, we're not going to send to that person again. We send to another one, because we try to share the workload, because it's a voluntary work. So like what he mentioned is that don't just send the same paper to the same reviewer again and again, because that you would make their life harder. So what we do is that we have an Excel spreadsheet and putting, who have done what. For example, this reviewer have reviewed one in January, another one in March. So next paper we send to another one. Keep doing like that. So, and the criteria for our reviewers that have at least them need to have a master degree. So we send to those who have a whole master degree or doing PhD or have a PhD. So that the qualification of reviewer. But we try to invite those who have publication experience. However, we find it's hard to do that. So just let it be. Anybody who have finished master degree and who are interested in research can join us to be our reviewer. So we have around now reviewer in the list. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor and Bong Kim Kong for sharing your like your experience, like how you the journal work and how get that manuscript review, and what are the ecosystem and the reviewer involved to ensure that paper is going to a kind of good standard or quality that can be published in your paper in your journal. Yep. So right now let me get back to Bong Sampawat. Could you please sharing us your experience about like how you choose the journal for publications? Let's say we have different type of journals, and if we compare like we have the local journal that have the high acceptance rates, and we have like the international journal that has like a very quite a low acceptance rate, but quite reputational that make you help you advance to your publication. So could you mind sharing us your experience?
Thank you, Kantai. Actually, I want to be frank that I've never published in local journal. I've only tried and have published with international journal myself. For me, before in choosing journal for publication, I first study the journal that sounds relevant, and I carefully review what are the scope and the aims of the journal. I study their acceptance rate, I study the submission guidelines for the authors, and also I browse through. I mean, some journal have open access, some journal don't have open access. So I would browse through the content of the journal of their previous publications and see if anything looks relevant. For example, like there's a journal on policy research, and that journal sounds relevant to my study, but the journal can be very heavy quantitative oriented, and since my research is not quantitative, I wouldn't want to submit my manuscript to that journal because my paper is qualitative based. And that's just one aspect of it. So like Professor Hyun mentioned earlier, studying the journal thoroughly before you decide to submit is very, very important. And it's also save your time, but also save you from getting rejected because you submit your paper to the wrong journal that doesn't fit with your paper. And another thing is also assessing the credentials of the journal and the publisher, like the Sage, the Taylor and Francis, those are international publisher, or the Wiley. And also this way also help you avoid the predatory journal, like what Professor Hyun mentioned is something you also need to be very careful. And also browse, as I just mentioned, browse through the content for their the quality of their publications and how relevant it is to your field. And also another thing is like it's very important to also check the guideline as you prepare for a submission, and because you don't want to start writing a paper and then turn out you have to go through and edit everything, like anything from reference style to word counts and the format of the paper, because this also very time consuming, and I've learned that from experience also. And it's a learning publication itself, is a learning process, and the key is to study the journal. And regarding the key criteria to consider is make sure you check the journal scientific rigor, and the impact factor and its reputation. There are several tools that you can check the journal index score and also the impact factors. Like one of them is the SciMago journal, and SciMagoJR.com. This is one way that you can check if the journal you want to submit to is a reputable journal or not, and their acceptance rate, their index score and stuff. I will put this website in the chat to check the journal. And also check the editorial quality and the editorial board members. Like Professor Hyun mentioned, it's very important that there are people in their editorial board that are familiar with the area you do your research on. For example, like Cambodia is researching on Cambodia is still a very small number compared to many other countries or regions. So often journals find it difficult to find an expert who familiar with Cambodia or have a good understanding of Cambodia to review your paper. So a lot of time that also could contribute to your paper getting rejected because there's no people willing to review, or also extending the time of reviewing process. And yeah, those are the key criteria that I've learned from throughout the process of learning to publish myself. And I will talk a little bit more about the next step after choosing the journal, and in case Dr. Hyun or Professor Hyun have anything else to add on to what I just said.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Sampo. I'd like to add a bit about my own experience publishing. So mostly when we want to publish something, people would always ask whether you choose a journal first or whether you, after you finish your article, and choose the journal. So I think most people that would have their own favorite journal. So like in my case, I'm working mainly in higher education. I have a few favorite journal that I would like to submit to and would like to publish in, for example, study in higher education or higher education. So, but for me, I don't choose journal before I publish. I focus on writing first, focusing on completing the article. Because why? There are a lot of journal. What you need is paper. So I focus on research, conduct the research, write the paper, make sure that the paper is done, ready for publication. I go to journal. I go to find out which journal that I would like to submit my article to. So in most cases, I look at the references first. So reference list, we will cite some journal, and I tend to send to those that I have cited in my own manuscript. So I look at the journal and I check with what Dr. Sampo mentioned, schematic journal ranking, to check whether the journal is Q1, Q2, or Q3, depending on the quality of the journal. So that's number one. So after that, I go to the journal website to look at their guideline. And when I look at the guideline, I only look at a few points. First one, word limit, because most of the time, what I face is that when I finish my article, 8,000 words, and my favorite journal accept only 7,000 words. So last month I submit one article to study in higher education. I look at their guideline that said 7,000 words, and I submit 8,000 words. I thought, okay, let's do it, and whether they accept it or not. And a week later, they said that I need to cut 1,000 words, and then and that journal, that article was 9,000 words. 9,000 words, I cut to 8,000 words. I submit to my favorite journal, and just asked me to cut another 1,000 words. I said, no, I withdraw that article from the journal and send to another journal that accept 8,000 words. So somehow it's very hard whether you try to limit your word limit within the journal that you aim for, or you just keep writing until you've done, and then you look for a journal that accept the amount of word, the word limit that within your own manuscript. So in my case, if I cannot cut and submit to that journal that I want to submit, look for another journal, because so many journals that you can find and submit to. So that's my own experience, is that I finish my article first, look for the journal, and when I look for the journal, I first three criteria: whether it is the word limit, and whether the reference, they use the reference like I prepare my manuscript or not, because some they accept Harvard reference style, and some they use the accept APA reference style. So if you don't do it on EndNote or other referencing software, you need to do it manually. Change all the reference all the intake and all the reference list to fit that journal, and it's very time consuming to change from one reference style to another. And finally, I look at the ranking. So when I submit to international journal, I want at least Q1 or Q2. So try to invoke Q1, which is the top. And if that doesn't work, maybe go for Q2. So far, I published a few articles, mostly in Q1. So that is the like my own criteria looking at ranking. But I never look at impact factor. I only look at whether it's Q1 or Q2 because I don't really believe in impact factor, but I believe in whether the journal is indexed in international database like Scopus or Web of Science, for example, and whether it's within my own word limit and whether it works with my reference. Because the rest, abstract or no introduction or everything else, most journal have the same kind of template, except different word limit, different reference style, and different kind of quality or ranking. Yeah.
Hi. Yep. Thank you for your insights, both Bong Sampho and Bong Kim Kong. Interesting point from Bong Sampho. I just know that as a submitter, you also need to check the editorial quality of board members so that whether they have the same feel or similar feel to your manuscript, so that they like you can lower their rejection rate also, because the feel, if the reviewer doesn't have the same feel like you, your paper might be easily rejected. Yep. And from Bong Kim Kong, yes, a good point. Like you need to focus on your writing first and then find out the journal later. But I think that might be time consuming, because you spend time to submit to one journal and you need to wait for their comments, and then you submit to another journal until you find that journal is meet your manuscript. So what if in the case like you have very limited time, let's say you are a PhD student and you want to publish within this year, but if that take time, what are the things you consider?
Yeah, I think it depends on the condition of your, for example, you are doing a PhD and then your university require you to publish, let's say, 2 articles before you can defend your PhD. In my case, there is no requirement like that. There's no publication requirement, but I just want to publish. So I published one article from my PhD thesis. I sent to 4 different journals. So that time I did not know much about journal ranking. I sent to one journal and it's like #1 in the field, and it was rejected like within a month. I did not know that the journal was like kind of, very high ranking. So I just sent out. I did not, at the time, I did not even know schema go, how to check journal ranking. So I just learned to publish. I started my publishing journey in 2017. So far like 5 years. And when I sent one to international journal, I just sent, and then I did not look at the ranking and not look anything. Later on, I just learned that okay, it was rejected because it's kind of a very top journal, and so I sent one. Took 1 month to just know whether they send it to review or not, and then send to the second journal another month, second journal another journal, like 4 months until they review. After the review, they reject. So that paper took 2 years to get published. 2 years from the first time you submitted. I submitted until the time that it was published, because it went to 3 different journals. 2 journal 2 months, 1 journal 4 months, and finally the 4th journal took around 6 to 7 months before they are accepted for publication. So if I had the condition that I need to publish before I can defend, it might be late for me. That's why most researcher, PhD researcher, they send to kind of open access journal. Open access journal, you need to pay about 2,000 per article. and it take quick, take short time, like 1 month. You submit December, it will be published in January in many cases, but you need to pay around 2,000. But if you submit to international journal that that doesn't charge fee, mostly at least 6 months to 2 years. So I published 3 articles out of my PhD thesis. One 2 year, one took 1 year, another one took 2 years. So like 5 years for three articles. So it's very hard in that case. Yeah.
Let me just add a little bit more information on the process of the review and waiting time. So yes, I agree. With Dr. Kim Kwong, it takes a long time to get published. The International Journal of Urban and Regional Research will usually see about 4 months for up to maximum 4 months for decisions to be reached after peer review. So about 95% of 95 or 96% of all the submissions will see the decision within 4 months, right? Those papers which are not sent to peer reviewers will probably receive the decision within less than 1 month, about 20, maybe 3 weeks on average. Now, that also means, when you get the first decision after peer review, which takes about 4 months maximum and hopefully less, it means you are going to be, and if you're required to revise and resubmit, you get about 6 months usually. This is what most journals will be operating with. Some writers may require more than 6 months for various reasons, for their jobs and or other circumstances not permitting them time to revise sufficiently, and therefore when that happens, they may require a bit more time. And then when that is your situation, all you need to do is to approach the journal and asking for extension. Most journals will be very sympathetic because they understand the life as an academic and researcher is very difficult, and therefore, they'll be sympathetically consider these extension requests and grant you extension. So all you need to do is just be frank and just approach the editors and the journal office for that extension. I'm doing the same thing with my papers. I have 2 papers which I just don't have time to revise within 6 months. I was asking for 3 months more extension. Now, when you get no decision within 4 months, it's also perfectly fine for you to approach the journal office and asking for where your paper is. So don't hesitate. Editors sometimes appear to be very high up in the sky and very brutal, but they are also fellow academics, and they are very sympathetic, especially towards researchers in early career stage, who are who are doing a lot of exciting research, and they have a lot more to say than more established researchers very often, because they are really doing the cutting edge research in the field, and editors want to hear more from those researchers, and they try to as far as I understand, the editors that I have come across, they are feeling very sympathetic towards and trying to help. So all you need to do is just reach out. If you don't hear from the journal within and it takes more than 4 months, just reach out to the journal office, just make an inquiry, and that's perfectly fine. Don't hesitate, don't get afraid. The same goes to extension as well. And also, if you have something to inquire about, ask around. I would probably say academics tend to a lot of the researchers try to do all by themselves in fear of being seen to being incapable, and therefore trying to do it all by themselves without asking. I think that's very not recommended. You just need to consult, reach out to your fellow researchers, your supervisors, and other researchers, and even if you don't know them in person, it's perfectly fine to reach out to them and just ask for some more information or advice. If you don't know anyone who has worked on Cambodia in certain area, but someone has written about this in other countries and you haven't met the person, I think it's perfectly fine to reach out to them and ask, well, I'm working on this area, as a researcher from Cambodia. I see that you have published on Cambodia in this area. and just introduce yourself and just ask, how was the experience of would you recommend any journal? I've got this material I want to publish, but I don't know which journal I need to publish, and just reach out to them and just ask for recommendation. That's perfectly fine. Some may not respond to you for various reasons, but I'm sure there are many who will be feeling very happy to respond and engage with you, because they are also in need of, you know, identifying, people who are like-minded and who are working on similar areas, and they'll be more than happy to, meet you and respond. So just, don't hesitate. I think that's very important for us to, in order for us to build the ecosystem of researchers, it's important to actually make it as a rule that you consult, ask for advice, and also respond to those inquiries in a very sympathetic way so that we can help each other.
Yep. I agree with you. Especially the last point. If you don't know much about the journal, you may reach out to your peer, your professor, or someone that has experience in publication, so that they can help you or suggest you which journal that you can try to submit the manuscript. I think we are quite running out of time, and maybe we are gonna get some question from our audience. Maybe from here or from Zoom. From Zoom, if you would like to interact, you may raise your virtual hand. And yes, from our audience, Dr. Supaya.
Oh, just two quick questions. First to the two editors here. What is it in the manuscripts that make you want to publish it? When you see it, you say, oh, I want to publish it in my journal. The second question to Professor Hyun. Your journal, I mean, you allude a little bit to the decentralization, the decolonization of the knowledge. So, what do you do to help promote indigenous knowledge making? I mean, from the perspective of the journal editor. Thank you.
You mean what do we do to promote the indigenous knowledge?
Yes, especially at the journal, because you have mentioned that you want to see local people publish about, knowledge, local issue, something like that. But is there anything more?
Well, I mean, this coming to Cambodia like this part of the effort to be able to interact and get connected. Another is, well, when you look at the submission and when you look at the regions where the authors are based, there are not many coming from Asia, especially East Asia or Southeast Asia. Not many coming from the Middle East. Not many coming from, say, Africa. So there are many papers coming from authors who are based in the UK or North America, and so on. Of course, when these authors who are located in Europe or North America are not necessarily, from the region, but they may be from Asia or from Africa who are working or studying in Europe or North America. But nevertheless, I mean, so we do have these issues, and I'm sure this is not something only I is experiencing. There are basically much lower, smaller pool of researchers in those regions who are writing about certain topics in certain disciplinary areas. So we do acknowledge that, and we constantly try to work with, trying to address these issues, and therefore, one thing we have decided to do more recently is to actually organize our annual editorial board meeting, in-person meeting, to be taking place in those regions where we want to promote, local scholarship. So we had the editorial board meetings all on Zoom during the last 2 years, unfortunately, and we first had the first in-person meeting in London very recently in November. But we have scheduled the next board meeting to be in Lebanon in Beirut next year, which will be combined with a larger academic event where we can engage with local researchers. We're trying to do basically repeat this in a year after year actually. We have already scheduled the board meeting in 2024 to be in Sao Paulo in Brazil, and also in Africa and in Asia. So that's what we are trying to do as a way of engaging with local scholarship. Another thing which will appear quite soon in the coming year, and a new initiative we are trying to do, is a mentoring scheme. It hasn't been officially announced yet, so we are kind of still working on the actual details. But we are trying to pilot a mentoring scheme, which is basically to provide one-to-one guidance and mentoring for promising researchers whose papers are in need of substantial revision, but still showing great potential, but who may be benefiting with a bit of a push and a guidance from more experienced researchers. And here we are looking at our board members and corresponding editors who may be in a position to be providing such mentoring support, and trying to do this for a small number of authors. We can't do this for every author given the size of the scale operation and so on, but for a small number of authors, especially from those regions and who are working on areas that we are lacking in terms of their presence in our journal space, to help them. So that's another thing. Another initiative we do is as part of book reviews, and our book reviews are all open access and available on our website without staying behind paywalls. One of the new initiatives we have just started is reviewing books in local language, not in English. So it's called Interviews. So we are going to have the first interview appearing on our website quite soon. The review has been completed and is in the process of copy editing. So those are basically books written in non-English, which deserve our scholarly attention and to be introduced to the international audience through our book review system. And therefore, that's another thing we have initiated recently. And we are more than happy to work with local institutions to be able to promote the scholarship locally embedded, so that it doesn't become only the story of Western scholars basically working on such production of knowledge. And we want to basically address the imbalance in the existing scholarship and promote the growth of local scholarship as much as possible, so that it can become more equal partnership between local communities and the international journals.
Maybe we can have one question from our audience. Yep.
Thank you so much, Professor and Doctor, for sharing such an insight views on the journal. So I have one, maybe like two questions, like in combined. So for example, like if to write a journal and if we pass a review for open access, either open access or besides the access, does the publisher will does the publisher will provide like an incentive or like a reward or some things, or do we have to actually like offer them to get up our papers published? And I think and also like Professor and Doctor have highlight a lot of like the challenges for the local experts, especially for research and theoretical matters. So I wonder if in the future there will be plan to develop a framework or an approach for the local researchers, especially young researcher or fellow experts, to be able to like have a joint discussion or like in timely manners that they can redevelop more to sustainable approach for the producing more quality papers locally. So that's my question.
I can provide, I guess, respond very briefly given the time. And as for the second question, I think it's important to continuously look for opportunities to collaborate in a mutually constructive way, not just one-way communication. there are many ways you can do this, and I think the positive lesson of the pandemic is actually you can do this more remotely without having to meet. Recently, I was part of the virtual summer school organized by Research Committee 21, which works on critical urban sociology. And the summer school that they used to organize was always used to be in person, but this year, because of the pandemic, it was taking place virtually, where a group of mentors were assigned to students to have regular meetings, so 3 meetings, each meeting dedicated to discussing a paper written by the student, which was very, I think it worked really well. I was one of the mentors and really liked the opportunity to meet the students. And it took place across I think almost a 3 month period, and each month, 2 student papers being discussed collectively with other students also providing input, and mentors, myself and another professor whose name is Diane Davis, also doing the same mentoring. And there were a few more groups like this taking place simultaneously. And I think this can be done as well, with researchers in Cambodia, like CDRI, working with others, to do this, who are feeling sympathetic toward the cause. The same thing can be done by, there are many small grants actually across the world. It doesn't require a lot of money actually to do this, and so such a small grant will be able to support such establishment of the network that would allow that kind of mentoring arrangement. I think it's important to actually identify these mentors to work with in our early careers who can actually benefit from the experience and from the knowledge. About the publishing, now, I mean, Dr. King Kong talked about the open access and the publication. Open access has multiple meanings actually nowadays. The public industry has been changing quite rapidly. So in established journals, there are also open access publications, which can be, which are available free of charge, without having to stay behind paywalls. And they are possible largely because of 3 pathways. One is researcher paying for the cost of themselves out of their own pocket or research funding. So it takes about anything between 2,000 to 3,000 US dollars for one paper. It can be higher depending on where you are looking at. Now, it can also happen because publishers sign an agreement with locally based research councils or government who provide a pool of funding that researchers from that have access to. So for me, as a UK-based researcher, my university, LSE, is part of this consortium. And when I recently published a paper with a publisher, with a journal in a publisher, and basically what they do is when the paper gets accepted, they will ask me, do you want to publish as an open access, publish your paper as an open access paper? And my co-author was in a university in the UK who wasn't part of the consortium, but my university was part of the consortium, and me as the corresponding editor was able to apply for this open access publication opportunity, largely because there was still funding provided by this consortium for researchers working in the university that is part of the consortium. So as long as the funding remains for that particular year, you can basically dip into the funding to publish your paper as open access without spending your own money. But that comes with limited number of funding and a limited amount of funding for the year, so that when the funding runs out, even though you're part of the consortium, that you won't be able to publish as open access. The third part is your research funding from a research council. So in the UK, for example, ESRC, as an example, supported research will require research output to be published as open access, and they will provide the funding for such publication. Other journals, which are basically open access only journals, which some of these are you need to be careful about. You submit and you immediately publish. That will be very dangerous for you to publish in that way. If you want to be recognized as a published researcher, serious researcher, submitting in a journal which presents themselves as academic journals, but if they basically publish anything that gets submitted within a month's time, oh, be careful. Those are usually in the category of predatory journals, and therefore not being taken seriously by other researchers. And if someone sees such publication in your CV, they are very likely to question your credential as a researcher. It's damaging your reputation basically. So be careful about that. And there's certain open access journals like in that category, and many are actually taking advantage of such researchers' aspiration and competitive environment to take advantage of the situation, and therefore those journals are something you really need to avoid. And you can basically find out more about these by looking at how they operate. And if they say we publish within X number of days, all you need to do is pay us. You probably want to delete those journals from your list of potential journals and ask around. And if you are a bit curious and a bit uncertain, make sure you just ask around and make sure you get the advice from more experienced researchers.
Thank you. I agree with everything that Professor Hyun has said, and I'd like to clarify a bit about open access journal. So from my experience, we look at open access journal. Let's say there are two types of open access journal, like Professor Hyun mentioned, is that one, you need to pay. And usually it take around only a few months, 1 or 2 months, you will get your paper published very quick, pay around 2,000, let's say. Another one is open as well, but you don't need to pay. It's just that journal happen to be open access, and its publication fee is kind of funded by other organizations. So you just submit your article, it goes through the peer review process, take 4-6 months. Finally, the paper is published, and it is published open access. You don't need to pay. So I done that one before. I submit an article to a journal, and I check before I submit. I check whether I need to pay any fee. They say no, it's funded by other organizations. So I submit that, and then it's open access. And it's a good thing to publish in open access that when your paper is published, it's free for everyone. So I got a lot of citation from that article, like around 40 citations so far, and very good. And I published another article in another journal. It's not open access. So it goes through the peer review process, taking 6-7 months, 1 year. Finally, like Professor Hyun has mentioned, is that before it published, the journal will ask you whether you want to publish open access, paying around 2,500, or you want to publish normally. So I don't have money to publish open access, so I just publish normally behind paywall. Okay, so that is another journal. So the third type of journal is that it must be, I mean, you need to pay. It's open access and you need to pay. That one, like Professor had mentioned, that you need to avoid. But somehow some researchers that want their paper to get published quickly, they pay 2 to 3,000, and it can be published within a month or two. Yeah. So the first one, open access, no fee, that's good, the best. Second one, option whether you publish open access, paying money, or you just publish behind paywall. And the third one, open access and pay. So the third one is not really good. Most people consider it as a predatory journal, but still a lot of researchers publish.
I mean, you just need to have your papers published. If you want to be seen as a serious researcher, your papers need to be published in a peer-reviewed journals. So that make sure there are many good journals which are open access journals, by the way, but these journals do have a serious peer review process, and therefore something that you can trust. But when I say you need to be careful about certain open access journals which are predatory, these are journals which do not really have the serious scholarly process built into the system.
Okay. May I accept like 1 or 2 questions from our audience from Zoom, and we're gonna get back to our audience in here. So apologize if I don't mention your name because we just only get your questions. From our Zoom, I just read the questions. What are those journal speaker would recommend for graduate student or new researcher to publish their research, local or internationally? Not only education, but other disciplinary like economics and finance. So, yep. Maybe a professor would like to answer.
I make it quick, given the time. Really depends on who you want to connect with, and also what your uh, publishing goal is actually. If you are in a PhD student, early career researchers who want to establish their in a career in academia or in research community, not only locally but also internationally, I guess there are certain things you may have to do to strengthen your CV. One of which is to publish in international peer-reviewed journals so that you can be recognized. You want your findings to be communicated as widely as possible, and this is where I guess your consideration comes in. And there are certain contributions that can be made by international journals in terms of having your researcher profile known to wider international community. Publishing in local language in local journal can also have their own function. I have a PhD student who just recently graduated, and she is also publishing one of her papers in local journal written. This is a Korean journal, but that journal has a strong credential and a reputation within Korean scholarly community, and therefore there's an advantage of doing this. And also you can reach out to local audience to have your name known and your findings to be shared. So it really depends on what your goal is. If you're aiming for international market, I guess people will have to read about your work, and therefore there's a certain way of, there's certain, I guess, style that needs to be decided on that basis. And when that happens, I suppose writing in English and publishing your paper in international journal will be quite important for your career advancement. But that shouldn't be the only way for you to advance your career, by the way.
Thank you. I'd like to add to what Professor Hyun has just mentioned. My advice for postgraduate student or BA or master or whatever is that if you want to publish locally or internationally, you need to work with. If you have advisor, work with your advisor. But in our context, what I see is that most advisors don't publish. So it would be hard for you to write paper publish. If your advisor are not researcher, they are probably cannot guide you to help you to publish. Another option, so the first option, work with your advisor. You write paper and then ask your advisor to help you with editing or shaping your article to ensure that it's good enough for publication either in local journal or international journal. However, if your advisor do not know how to publish, cannot cannot encourage you to publish, seek for advice from other researcher, maybe your friend or your senior or anybody who you know that are active in research and can provide support to you, not just your advisor. So I've been talking with a number of students who have conducted their thesis, they complete their thesis, and then I just approach to them, would you like to publish it in journal? And you can do that, you can draft your paper, summarize your thesis and make it into paper. I can help you review your article, review your manuscript, edit it, and we publish together. So seek someone who are not your advisor, but can help shape your paper and make it ready for publication. It's just that you include your name and the one who helped you edit and write your paper. And that person may not be your advisor if your advisor do not know how to write for publication. So I have my own experience as well. When I did my master, for example, I conduct my thesis, my advisor doesn't encourage me to publish because my advisor themselves do not know how to publish, for example. But now I learned from the experience and I try to encourage other postgraduate student master degree, for example, if they complete their thesis, try to shape their thesis into paper. And if you don't have advisor who help you, find some researcher that you know. You can know them, through Facebook or other medium, like you join session like that, who are researcher, and maybe they can help you. Approach them, send email to them, and ask them to look at your paper, your manuscript, and publish together. For example, co-written or co-author paper. So that person do not help you write, but help you edit and review and shape your manuscript until it is good enough for publication in the country or internationally.
Let me just briefly add within 30 seconds, for all your careers, PhD students, there are many ways you can train yourself to get to know how to publish. One is book reviews, and book review as a starting point is really a good process for you to understand how the journal publication process works, but still have your name appearing in a piece of a book review that gets recognized by the journal and published there. Another is there are many blogs, actually academic blogs, which are run by various research institutions. The center I'm directing, LSE Southeast Asia Center, has Southeast Asia blog, which will be welcoming the contributions from researchers in CDRI and also many others who work in Cambodia. Like a short lengths in 800 to 1500 word and length blogs, which are based on real research findings, will be a nice way actually to have your research known to the wider community, but in a different style, right? So there are many little bits and pieces which you can do to strengthen not only your CV, but also have your name known, but also share your research findings in this very in a dissemination strategy that doesn't confine yourself to academic journals. So consider all different routes as a way of sharing your ideas, findings, and consider in an academic journal as a way of one of many ways. And I think there are important many positive advantages of considering various avenues of publication. And academic journals take such a long time, and therefore, just working on one academic paper and not doing anything else can be quite detrimental. So consider things that can be done within a short period of time, in addition to considering academic journal writing, which takes a lot longer to finish.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Bong Sampo, I think I got one question from Zoom. Maybe you can have clarify your answer, like how to identify predatory journal. I think Bong Kim Kong has mentioned some, but can you share your tips, like how you identify predatory journal? You want to avoid not even like citing those kind of journal or article from that journal.
So there are a few things actually. Identifying predatory journal is actually not at all difficult. As Professor Hyun mentioned too, those journal tend to, those predatory journals, they tend to try to give a very like, it's too good to be true. By that, I mean, like they try to get like kind of promise. So they would like contact you out of the blue, like to your email. Like I get that random email a lot. So to submit your paper to them, and they try to appeal to you that any paper that you submit will be published, and then they also don't disclose any other fee that they will charge you if you submit your paper. And so like if you receive like an email from a random journal editor or something like that that contact you to submit your paper, that is one key thing to identify that's a predatory journal, because a reputable peer-reviewed journal would not contact you to submit paper like that through email if you're, yeah. So that's one thing I learned. And yeah, and I don't think there's anything else. Maybe Dr. Heng can add, but that's the one thing. If you see that something is too good to be true, then that's probably a predatory journal, because as we learned from our discussion earlier, acceptance rate at reputable journal are very low, even if it's just like not a very highly, like a Q1, Q2 journal. There's still peer review process is not that simple or easy. So if something looks too easy to publish, that's probably the one.
Okay, I just thank you, Bong, for your points to consider when about the type of journal, especially the predatory journal that they like invite you to publish, but you have to pay for them. So thank you very much for your insightful point and comment and discussions today. And for our audience, if you have more questions in here, you may like have a chit chat after these conversations. And for our Zoom audience, you may reach out to our speaker via their email. Our team will post in the chat box. So thank you so much. So now I would like to end our conversation in here, and I would like to wish everyone all the best and enjoy the rest of the day. And hope you have a good time and learn something from today's discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kantai, for moderating the discussion today, and also thank you to CDRI for the invitation and our panelists, my co-panelists today, and our audience, of course.
Thank you, Bong, and see you next time.